Hi guys, I'm Jenny. Welcome back to the Big Sew Along, where we talk about all things sewing, mostly Tina Given sewing. And that's where we're going to start as usual today. I'm sure anybody who's watching this channel and is a big Tina Givens fan probably already knows that Tina released a new pattern a couple of weeks ago, two weeks ago maybe, called the Avalon. It's like a shift kind of tunic. It's got like a little opening at the front with a button closure. It's pretty wide, it looks like. And it's got one of her funky gathered kind of hems, at least in the front. That's what it looks like in the photograph. Anyways, if you haven't seen it yet, you should check it out. I did buy that pattern, even though I said I wasn't going to buy any more patterns. We all know that's a lie anyway. I did get that pattern, and I have the pattern glued together and cut out, but I have not cut it out of my fabric yet. Although I do have a really cool piece of vintage like rayon or viscose or something. I don't know what it is, but I think that could be really cool for that new Avalon, so I might try that this week. Speaking of fabrics, today we're going to go back to our pants, and we're going to finish up three of them. We're going to finish up the Plinka, the Frankie, and the, I always want to say Oprah. It's not Oprah. It's Elope. The Elope. Those are the three we're going to finish today. But before I get to those, let me just say, we were talking, somebody was asking me about fabric choices for these pants. I will say that in my experience, almost all of the Tina Givens pants look good in a fabric with a little bit of drape. Like linen is almost always my number one choice. I have successfully made the Plinkas in a number of other fabrics, including quilting cotton. They have a completely different feel to them because they don't have the same drape. But I have a pair that I made in quilting cotton a couple of years ago. I wear them all the time. I love those pants. The original Plinkas I made were in a 100% silk charmeuse. Those were probably my favorite pants of all time. I wore them so much that they literally became threadbare and just fell apart. Not the seams, like just the fabric was just dissolving. I wore them and I washed them so much. For a heavier weight fabric, even I think linen, I think you could use a heavyweight linen for pretty much any of her pants. The only thing is the ruffles and the bindings could get a little tricky with a heavier weight fabric, and you will see that today. The elope that I made, I have made, I don't know, three or four pairs of elopes. The first two were linen. The third one was a really lightweight rayon challis. Those all have beautiful drape, and I love the way they look. The challis is almost like, it's so fluid, it doesn't have any body to it at all. But I do love it. It's really cool. But anyways, today I wanted to try something in a more winter weight. I live in just outside Detroit, Michigan, and it is cold here. And I walk my dogs every day, and I gotta tell you, wide leg, lightweight pants, not gonna work come February. So my thought was a couple of things. A pant with a narrower leg, because the wind can't get up there, and something in a heavier fabric. So the tricky part, obviously, is the heavy fabric with Tina's pants. I can't remember how I got off on that tangent. But what I was gonna say is, I made the elope this time out of a lightweight pinwheel corduroy plaid. I know. Whatever. I can't decide if I like them. I actually do like them. I'm going to say I like them. Heavier fabric in that pant is tricky because of the bindings. The pleats make it thick, and then you have to put a binding over the pleats. All that makes it a little bit trickier. But it can be done, and I actually I think I like the way it came out. So I may try that again. I have a heavier weight twill I want to try for another pant, and my feeling is a narrower leg pant and a heavier weight fabric, because there's less volume, and I feel like a lesser volume is better with that stiffer fabric. So I'm probably going to use my twill and try another pair of Oprah or maybe an Archie. Okay, so that's the Frankie I've made in a really, I've made it twice in cotton, but neither of them are quilting weight cottons. They're both lighter weight than that. One is like almost like a, it's like a loose weave, almost like a homespun kind of fabric. That's really, it doesn't really have drape, but it has like a real crispness to it, but it is not as stiff as quilting cotton. The other one was just a piece of vintage cotton. I couldn't tell you what it is, but it's definitely lighter weight than like a quilting cotton, maybe just a shade lighter. The other pair that I made out of, I made the Frankie out of, I made out of a stretch velvet. I think that pant would be beautiful in any velvet. Stretch velvet, again, was a little bit tricky because of the bindings. Anytime you make a binding, it's gonna, you want the binding to be thin, because you've got to double it over on itself and then fold it on top of the pants. So you're just getting a lot of bulk there, which means that opening is gonna be stiff. It's not gonna have very much flow to it. The cotton ones I made, that was fine. The velvet ones, that binding was not my favorite. It's fine, I like them. I just feel like that binding makes it a little stiffer. So at the end of the day, I feel like your lighter weight fabrics are probably best for any of the pants you're gonna put a binding on around the leg opening. Again, if you want to use a heavier fabric, I feel like some of the narrower pants are probably better. I feel like you could definitely do the Frankie and not use a binding, just hem it like regular, hem it like a regular pant. Oh my god, what happened to me? Hem it like a regular pant, like if you didn't do the side tucks. Anyways, at the end of the day, I feel like fabrics that have drape are really going to be your better choices for most of her pants. If any of you have done pants and heavier weights, I would love to hear about it. I do have a couple of pieces of suit weight wool that I think would be nice for some of the pants that have a little more structure, but they're lightweight enough to do a nice binding. So maybe the brownie or another Frankie or something like that. Okay, enough about fabrics. Is it ever enough about fabrics though, really? So today I split this up into 3 sections so that you can go to each one and see how to finish it if you want to. You don't have to watch the whole thing. The only thing I'll say is at the very last one I do is the Elope, and I don't do the binding again in that because I do it in the first 2. So if you need the binding tutorial, just go to the last like 4 minutes or something of one of the previous sections and it'll be there. Okay, the first one we're going to talk about is the Elope. Nope, it's not. It's the first one we're going to talk about is my beloved Plinka. This week I made it out of a silk taffeta, and I washed this taffeta. I really like the way taffeta looks when it's washed. This one didn't come out that drapey after I washed it, so I'm not entirely thrilled with that. You'll see the pictures at the very end of how that came out. But it's still a beautiful pant, and all in all, I'm pretty darn happy with it. So here's my tutorial on how to finish your Plinka. Okay, so here is our Plinka, and you should have 4 marks on here for pleats. They are vertical marks. They go like this. Your pleats are actually going to go horizontal, but they're just marks for where they go. They're a little faint on here, so I'm going to make mine darker with chalk just so you guys can see what I'm doing. I also extend mine because they are not really long enough. I'm just using chalk, but you can use, pins or something if you prefer. I'm not worried about this chalk coming out. I think it will. So, okay, so those are where our pleats are going to go. You need a space at the bottom of this pant leg for your hem and your binding. I think it's probably about 1.25 inches that you need. I usually make my mark at 1.5 inches. So I'm just going to do that right there. That's 1.5 inches. And I'm going to put a mark right there at the bottom of my pleat marking. Then you're going to make 3 marks for your pleats. The pleats are 1.5 inches each, but you need a little space between them. So I make my marks at 2 inches, which is handily exactly the width of this ruler. That's 1, 2, 2, 3, and 3. Make that one a little darker. Okay, now I have all my marks for my pleats. All we're going to do is we're going to start, I think it's easier to start up here, but you can start at the bottom. It doesn't really matter. Make sure you don't pin your pant leg together. You go up here, you're going to grab your pant about 1/2 inch below that last mark. Just make a little pinch in your fabric right there and lay that pinch, that folded edge, right on the next mark down. It'll be hard for me to do this on camera. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. You'll see here in just a second that I have just folded that top piece down to that next mark. Now I'm going to do it again. I'm going to just take a pinch right here about 1/2 inch below my mark. I'm going to just fold my fabric there and I'm going to pull it straight down to the next mark, just like that. I'm going to pin that in place. I'm going to do it one last time. 1/2 inch below that fold and meet that up to the very last mark, the one at the bottom that we made for our hem. Okay? There we go. Okay. So it looks like that. And to do it one more time, just so you guys can see what I'm doing. This is my first mark. I'm just gonna pinch it about 1/2 inch below that first mark. And I'm gonna take that fold of fabric and lay it right on the next mark down. Like that. I'm going to do that again. 1/2 inch below that mark. I'm going to move that and I'm going to fold that down to the next mark. Trying just to keep those all in a straight line. You can see how my chalk line is still matching up. Trust me, it's a lot easier to do if you're not trying to show it on a camera. Although it is a little fidgety, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. All right, so next thing, the last one, we're just gonna grab it again. 1/2 inch here, move that down to the next line. Pin it in place. So you should have 3 pleats that look something like that. And that's 2 of mine. We're going to do this again on the back side of this, and then on all 4 of the other, all the 4 pleats on the other pant leg, obviously. Then we're just going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew straight up this line. We're going to start right here at the bottom of this first pleat and make sure you back tack. You'll want to go into this right here. Good pin. Right here. We're just going to sew straight up this line. Just be careful because your pleats can get caught underneath your presser foot. So just go slowly and check as you go. And you're gonna go all the way up to this last mark that we made so that you're sure that you catch that very last pleat under there, okay? Back tack at both ends, and you may even wanna go over it an extra time just because they're pleats and you don't want them to pull out. But you're gonna do that on all 4 pleats on both legs. For the next step, we're gonna put our ruffles on. This is roughly what our pants should look like. And it looks like it's laying pretty flat here, but once you stand up, this stuff falls out. Also, I'm using taffeta, so it's a little stiffer. But anyways, and look, I have no green thread, so I guess you can see better how I sewed it because I had to use black. Okay, this is the right side of our pants. First thing I'm gonna do is turn these inside out. So the wrong side facing me. Like this. This is the wrong side of our pants. Now, you should have 4 pieces of ruffle that look just like this. And you can make them into ruffles however you need to make them. I usually just do the old-fashioned 2 rows of basting stitches. So get one of your ruffles gathered, however you do that. If you're having trouble with your ruffles, just look in the search bar here on YouTube. There are tons of videos on different ways to make ruffles. So you're going to take the wrong side of your ruffle and place it against the inside of your pants. So you've got wrong sides together here. And you're just going to start pinning it on. Now, I'm not going to fold my edge under because my fabric is cut on the bias. It's not going to unravel. But the instructions say, and you should do this if your ruffle isn't cut on the bias, you're going to want to fold this towards you. So you have that raw edge folded. It'll be covered when you sew these together. And pin it down like that. Like I said, so it looks something like that. I'm not going to do that because mine are cut on the bias and they're not going to unravel. And part of the reason that I do that is because I like the way the bias looks when it ravels a little bit. So I'm going to leave mine raw like that. And we're just going to continue to pin this around, and you're going to just kind of check your ruffles as you go to make sure you're liking the way they look. Once you get one side pinned on like that, you're just going to flip your pant over and do another one. Okay, so the second half of the ruffle is just going to you're going to overlap it. Oh, this is dark. Sorry about that. So this is the end of my first ruffle. And I'm just going to overlap this one right on top of it. Just like that. If you are folding under the edges of your first ruffle, you don't have to do that on the second one because it's going to be underneath the first one. All right, so just like that. So when you're done, you're just going to go to the sewing machine now and sew this on. And you do the same thing to the other leg. Now, when you're done doing this section, when you fold this down, you should have a seam on the right side of your pants. This is the wrong side of my pant and the wrong side of my ruffle. Okay, so this is what we have so far. We have our pleats and our ruffles. This is the right side of my pants. And you can see I've trimmed my seam allowances down there on the hem. And I have lots of basting threads to get rid of. But we're going to put our bindings on. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to flip these ruffles to the inside of our pants. And we're going to take our 2 binding strips. You should have 2 of these, and they should be folded in half lengthwise and pressed like this. And then we are going to place them raw edges of your bindings facing the raw edges of your ruffle and hem. And we're just going to place them in here like this. We're going to run it right along the inside edge. So this is the outside, the right side of our pant, our seam, which is on the outside. the right side of our ruffle, and this is going right on top of the ruffle and just right around the edge. Okay, so this is our binding all the way around. I have extra here. Now the instructions tell you to just do the same thing you do with the ruffle, which is to fold one of these edges under like that, and then just place the other one over top. And that is absolutely fine if that's the way you want to do it. I feel like that moves around a lot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a mark right here where my binding meets, and I'm going to cut this excess off with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now I'm going to go back to the sewing machine and sew mine together, my binding together, just on that short end, right? And then I'm going to sew this all the way around this edge. I'm going to do the same thing on the other pair, on the other leg. I hope you can see that. This seems kind of dark, but I hope you can see what we're doing there. So now what we should have is something that looks like this. This is the strip that we've just sewn on. This is the right side of our ruffle, the right side of our pant. All we're going to do now is we're going to press this up over the seam allowance like that. And the whole thing, once you get it all pressed, should look something like that. And now we're just going to pin this down along this edge, and we're going to edge stitch that down all the way around. And then, my friends, you are finished. Except for, I forgot to say, my ruffles, like I said before, are cut on the bias, so I didn't need to hem them or anything. If you are using fabric that is not cut on the bias, or that you don't want to have a raw edge on, you're going to want to hem that ruffle, and I recommend doing that before you gather it up. It's just a lot easier. So check your length first, and then hem that ruffle first before you attach it, I mean. And yeah, this is it. We're gonna edge stitch this little piece of binding down, and our plinkas will be finished. All right, so I hope that all made sense. I wanted to show you guys because I talk about this in that tutorial, and then I don't show it to you at the end. I just wanted you to see, when I say you need 1.5 inches or 1.25 inches between the bottom of your pant and your first pleat, this is why. Because this is where your binding lays at the end, and this is where your first pleat is. And you don't want those to be much closer than that, much closer together than that, because you don't want your binding to accidentally go over that pleat. So that was the whole point, and reserving that 1.5 inches at the bottom of your pant before you start pleating it up. Okay, I hope that was clear for you guys. I apologize. This is I have this I have 2 fabrics I could have used for these pants, dark green or black. I went with dark green, hoping that you'd be able to see it a little better. If you have any troubles, or if you have any other questions about those, please just leave them below, and I am more than happy to answer those for you. All right, so next up is Frankie. Alrighty, here we have our Frankie pant. And we can see these are the side panels. It's our hem. So the directions say you can pleat or gather this any way you like. Looser gathering or pleating for a wider pant, tighter gathering or pleating for a narrower leg hole, obviously. So you could just use a gather stitch and gather this up, which I think would be really cute. What I have decided to do on this one is just do some random pleating, and so I'm just going to do kind of the same idea as the pleating we did on our Plinka. I'm just going to fold this in a little bit here and here. Whoops. and I think one more time. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. So I'm just going to put 3 random small pleats in the side of each side panel. Now, if you want, you could put your pleats in the front or in the back or wherever you want. This side would be cute on this side panel, but and although I'm making these pleats kind of random, I am going to check to make sure that the width on those 2 panels between these two, it's roughly the same, just so I don't have just so they don't look totally like cockamamie when I'm wearing them. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the sewing machine and baste those pleats down just like that. Okay, so that's what my pleating looks like. Yours can look any way you like it to look. Or you could not put pleating at all and just leave it wide leg. I don't know if I said that already, but anyways. So for the bindings, they're gonna look just like this, just like the ones for the Plinka pant did, and you're gonna fold them in half lengthwise, oops, and press them so that they look like that. We're gonna apply these to the inside of the pant, just like we did on the Plinka. All right, so just like that. Again, you can just, fold this over and stitch right over that raw edge if you want. I prefer to take this out and actually just sew a 1/2 inch seam here and then put it back in. And then we're just gonna sew all the way around the edge like we did on the other ones. Okay, so this is the right side of our Frankie, and you can see that I have sewn my binding on, sewn to the wrong side, and it's pressed flat. And now we're just gonna do the exact same thing we did on the Plinka. We're gonna fold it to the right side and press it down so that it looks like this. And then we're going to, get rid of some threads here, my goodness. We're just gonna pin it all the way around the top edge, and we're gonna edge stitch it right along the edge. And you're done, that's it. I will say, when you sew this binding on, you can see here, the binding is not wide once it's folded in half. So I don't recommend using a 5/8 inch seam allowance. I used a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You could maybe do 3/8. But if you do much more than that, that's all the cuff that's going to show when I use a 1/4 inch. So just so you know, you may want to use a smaller seam allowance here than your regular 5/8. But that's it. So that top stitch this binding around the edge here, and you were finished. Okay, so Frankie is obviously one of the easiest pants to make because you really don't do a lot to the bottom. There's a little gathering or pleating, which is completely optional, and the binding, and that's it. But just so you know, the pants that you see in those pictures, those are these pants. I use 2 different kinds of vintage cotton fabric, both pretty much the same weight. Again, slightly lighter weight than a quilting cotton, more like a shirting, just so you guys know what that fabric is and how it looks when it's made up. All right, number 3 is our Elope. On the Elope, you can see here, before we go any further, this is our cuff. We have 4 pieces. They're all exactly the same. You can see that this cuff is not the same on both sides. This is shorter and straighter. This is longer and more curved. As far as I can tell, it does not say in the pattern which is which. I use this shorter, straighter edge for my inseam. The other thing is, the instructions in the Elope tell us to sew the outside seam of our pant, the outside seam of our cuff, and the darts, and then sew those 2 together, and then sew the inseam. I'm not going to do that because we already have this constructed this far, and I don't think it matters. This is the way I've always done it in the past, and I prefer this method. So the pant is ready to go. Now we're going to do our cuff. For this, I've gone ahead and marked my darts in chalk, so hopefully you guys will be able to see that. It also says to fold on the dotted line and stitch on the straight lines. I just ignore that dotted line. It's not going to make any difference. It has to be in the middle of these two. So we're going to fold this to the outside, and we're going to line our dart legs up. Just like you would on a regular, like on any dart. Just be aware that these darts are not, the legs on these darts, because the pant leg isn't even, the dart legs are not even. So it's not going to match at this hemline here when you fold it. You want it to be just make sure that the lines match up and don't worry about this hem down here. Yeah, that matches. And then we're going to do the same thing on this one. And again, I've used chalk just so you guys can see it, and I'm not sure that's even working that well, but you can mark your darts obviously any way you like. A lot of people just prefer to use pins. I actually often prefer to use pins myself. Okay, so we're going to do that 4 times. So we have 2 darts on each panel, and then we're going to go ahead and just sew those darts. So this is what it looks like once we have our darts. We have our darts sewn in, and the instructions tell us to press them open. So like that. So they're flat. You can see a little bit better. That's the center right there. Then you're going to see here, because of these darts and the way that they're made, you're going to see that your hem here is uneven. I don't know. Can you see that? So we're actually just going to trim that off, and I do that from the back side for this just because it's easier for me to see it here. I'm using this crazy plaid fabric, so it's harder to see on the front. Just trim just like that so it's nice and even. This one is more of a curve, so just like that is good. And we're going to do the same thing to the other side. Okay, then we're just going to sew these 2 pieces together. Remember that there are 2 sides to this, so you want to be sure that you have short side to short side, long side to long side. And then you're going to have something that looks like this. I've already sewn mine together, and I've serged the edges, and I've just pressed them to one side. You don't really know which is the front and which is the back on this pant because they're both the same, but so just pick one. Turn the pants inside out, the cuff right side out. And we're just going to put our cuff right inside here. And then we're just going to pin it around, matching our side seams. And you can see again on this cuff, just because of the way it's cut, it's going to be at a really sharp point here, which is not really going to fit in that, on that edge. So just trim that off a little bit. Like that, so it'll fit in there. Going to pin that right there. And I'm going to pin my other side seam, and exactly the same thing here. Trim that off so it's not a sharp point. You'll never get that to fit in that pant leg without having a weird, you know, shape. All right. Now we're just going to finish pinning this all the way around. All right, now we're just going to go back to the sewing machine and sew that down. I'm sorry, sew that together. We're going to sew that together. We're going to finish that edge however you want to, and then we're going to just press that. I usually press it down, but you can press it whichever direction you like. Okay, guys, so there we go. I have already pressed my seams down and finished them. You can also, if you want to, if you want that seam allowance to lay flat, just do a little top stitch about you know, an eighth or maybe even a quarter of an inch away from that seam to hold that down. This is a sort of a heavyweight corduroy. I don't even know if these pants are going to be cute or just crazy. But I'm not sure about top stitching on it, so I have not done that on these. I may do it later. I just haven't decided yet. Okay, so the only other thing we have left to do for our elope is put our bindings on. And that is going to be done exactly the same way that we did it in the last two pants. In the Plinka and the Frankie, it's exactly the same. So I'm not going to show you that here. But once you put that on, you are finished with your elope. Okay, so just one more thing to touch on here. That is the binding on my elope. And it actually came out pretty well. This is not a really heavyweight corduroy, but it's definitely heavier than something I have used for these pants before. I think the binding came out pretty well on that, but I will say it was tricky. It was fighting me. But aside from that, I think it worked pretty well, and I think you can definitely use a slightly heavier weight fabric for that if you also are living someplace where you might be needing slightly warmer pants right about now. Okay, so now for our next video. I'm not sure yet if I'm going to do a couple more pant finishes, to be honest with you. I might be over that for a minute. Not that I won't go back to it. I will. Just made a lot of pants this week. So I may do the new dress next week, the Avalon, or I might pick something else. I have a couple of other things I've really wanted to make. The Mila I have not yet made, and I'd really like to, or also the Nancy Drew, for some reason, has been really calling me. So also, the reason that I did this video and the last video was because a couple of people requested it. So if you guys have anything that you would like me to do a sew through on, anything you'd like to see from beginning to end, anything you have questions about, leave me a comment below, and I will be happy to do my best and try to sort it out for you and see what we can figure out together. All right, guys, thanks again for stopping by. I really do appreciate it. Thanks again for always hitting like, and for people who subscribe and all of that stuff. It means a lot to me. It really, really does. Thank you so much. I will see you next time.